Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now, here's your host, Roxanne Derhaj.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhaj. Thanks again for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne. Now today I have a special guest, and Charle, tell me your last name because it's not on your bio and it's escaping me right off the top.
It's because it's from my website. I'm sorry. It's Charle Peck, P-E-C-K. Peck.
Right, Charle Peck. And I just looked at her name as I was sending this. But anyway, so sorry about that. So I'm going to tell you, Charle's got a bit of a unique background. And actually, Charle had reached out to me a little while back. And me and my harriedness, I didn't realize. And she's going back to school to be a therapist, and she'd connected around that. And now she's coming on because she's done some phenomenal things since we spoke. And I thought her complement of the things that she's doing in the world would be a good space for my listeners to kind of tune in. So a bit about her. Has this passion to make the place a world a better place, such a thing that most of us that end up in the field of social work and psychotherapy are hoping to do. And she's hosting a new podcast. It's about to go live on March 3rd, she said. And it's called Advancing Humanity, it's making its appearance, like she said, in this March of this year. She holds intriguing conversations with people who contribute to their quest and is willing to challenge the status quo. As an American living in Canada, her worldly understanding of cultural diversity allows her to have an open mind and equitable discussion around a variety of topics. Her background also brings a unique perspective as a teacher and clinical therapist, just finishing up now, and a parent of 3 boys. So I'm sure that part is probably quite intriguing. How old are they?
16, 9, and 6.
Oh, wow. So you've got all the stages in there.
Yeah.
And Charle's teaching and mental health training makes her an expert on helping people thrive, especially in their teen years. And as we know, we unfortunately are in a crisis with our teenagers. So what a valuable thing you're doing out there, specializing with teens. And she's eventually hoping to blend the professions to promote healthy lifestyle practices throughout community education. Again, something that we're needing.
Yeah.
So you're an American.
Yes, I am.
Where did you grow up?
Kentucky, actually, northern Kentucky, near Cincinnati, Ohio. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you end up in Canada?
I got married to someone I met in Mexico, believe it or not.
Okay.
And I ended up here, and then we got divorced, but I had a son with him, so decided to stay here. And then I got remarried, had 2 more children, but to another American. So, yeah, every time we cross the border, they say, "What the heck are you doing here?"
Okay, aren't you going the wrong way? They must say at times, right?
But it's fine. It's a great life.
So I often say that all of us that end up in the field of helping have a story. And I know, my story I've written about in my book. What got you interested in helping people?
I lost direction in my life in my early 20s, and it took me a long time to grow up. And so when I started teaching the social sciences and parenting classes, and I love what I get to teach. And I've always had a background with human development and child development. And so I went through some hurdles and obstacles in my life like many people did, but I told you I had to grow up, and it took me a long time. And so with all the hindsight, I realized that connection and health and reflection, all of it makes sense in growing as a person, and I'm constantly growing. I really want to help people get over those hurdles in a way easier way than I did. So that's my drive. And then I get to teach. I get to teach every day, teenagers. I love it. But I just feel like there's so much more I can do outside of the classroom. And I'd love to take that perspective and the skills I have and share it with people on a massive scale. And that's what led me to where I am today.
So tell me, you're around teenagers all the time. I have a teenager like you.
Yes.
What is the world missing with teenagers today that things are going so awry?
Resilience is the one word answer. And I think a lot of
Okay.
us understand that. I think what's important is we have to validate our teens as having real feelings and real struggles, that they're in a really unique state of life. I mean, their brain is developing. We know so much more about the brain, and then it doesn't finish developing until the mid-20s. And so that prefrontal cortex is all the planning, all the decision making, the long-term consequences of their actions, all of that is still developing. And so we have to understand our role as educators and parents and support people in the community of what we can do to help them thrive. So I think what we did 10 to 15 years ago is we started holding their hand a lot more. And I think coupled with technology infusing their life so much, I think we've done them a disservice. Mm-hmm. And so they don't have the proper social skills and the self-regulation skills. So that's where I think we're lacking.
So the basic things that, I often say, I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, and my mom would say, okay, you guys go outside. And I had 5 siblings, and we would have conflicts. We would have garden parties. We would plant little gardens. We would have, and we would like create all these games all the time. And then, of course, in the Caribbean, you had fresh fruits. And so a lot of times we were like making up games and connecting and not liking each other sometimes and hurting each other and then getting back together. And then, so I think a lot of that taught me about, connection and conflict and different things and how to entertain myself like it did my siblings, right? And I often think that today, that's one of the biggest things, because unfortunately, like you said, with technology, what's happening today with people actually learning how to connect? You see it in the classrooms. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you see.
Well, it's so complex. I mean, I don't think there's one answer, and I think it's so individual, but overall, they need to be connected to something, and some people, they need to be connected as people. We all do. It is a human drive, a human need. And so where they're hindered these days is all of their friends are online. All their friends are on social media. Mm-hmm. So if they're not connected to those people on social media, they're missing out. And that's detrimental to their growth. It really is. That's why there's a lot of isolation. There's like a lot of mental health issues because of that feeling of isolation and missing out. It really is a thing. It's very complex though. I mean, it does go beyond like it's not that they can't solve problems. It's that their problems are a little different. And I think that we're not able to navigate that with them as well because we're not in their world as much. So we have to understand it better. And I don't know that we're always willing to. I mean, we have problems with families. I mean, I come from a family. I'm divorced, I mean, that my 16-year-old comes from a divorced family, and then my other 2 do not. And I can see the differences. We talked about how you got to go outside as kids and you had conflict and you dealt with that. Well, now we're dealing with helicopter parenting, and such a blanket term. I mean, it's really complex, the feelings that we parents have involved in that. And we really want the best for our kids, but we don't know how to give that to them. And so we feel like growing up, like we had to play with them and entertain them and solve their problems for them so that they could have a good life. But that's part of the disservice we've done is we haven't let them solve some of their conflicts, and it's hurting them. They're not understanding how to do those things themselves. So the problems are there with technology too, because it's a different set of problems.
So they are having such different problems that us as parents, we didn't have them before, right? Like, I mean, if I wanted to talk to my friends in Trinidad, I would have to like wait to use the phone, quite literally, right? Like, and to make that one phone call and, not be on the phone too long because my parents knew what I was doing and it couldn't be, you know what I mean? If it was a boy, it was even worse, all those things, right? So all those basic things that maybe my parents had to worry about today, your kids are in bed or you think they're in bed, they're connected, they're talking to people all the time. And these are people that they don't necessarily know.
True.
Maybe when they're gaming, types of things. So there's a lot like to your, a lot of complexity to things that we didn't fathom when we were growing up. And now we're trying to problem solve with teenagers. So what, in your kind of realm with teenagers in your class, or just in what you're specializing in school, what makes it difficult for teenagers to come forward?
I think they like we did. I think they feel like they're not going to be understood, that we adults have no idea what they're experiencing. And I think they're right, and I think they're wrong. I think that we don't validate them enough. We need to really listen to what their true concerns are and give them credit that they're actually reflecting more than we think they are, and that they have capabilities more than they think they do. Or than, I mean, one of the problems is when I teach my parenting class, I always start off the course saying, did your parents mess you up or set you up? And they are like, what? Right. And then I say, but your parents are human beings. And a lot of times they just don't know what to do with you, because a teenager is difficult in lots of ways. They're trying to still need you, but they also need to navigate away from you. And that's very difficult for parents. Mm-hmm. We don't really know, unless you're educated, unless you are thrown into it like I am and do the research, we don't really know what to do with them sometimes. We love them, but there's a lot of conflict. And so a lot of the conflict resolution needs to come up too.
So I hear two things. And what I find fascinating is you're saying we're helicoptering. So we wanted to help them out that much more, but at the same time, we're not validating.
Yes.
So I'm that's confusing if I'm listening, and I understand what you're trying to say. But really, if we're helicoptering, are we just doing for them without asking them what they need?
Yes, that's right, Roxanne, because when you helicopter, and I'm not saying every parent does it, and I'm not saying I haven't done it, and I'm not saying that the intention isn't good. It's always good. I think parents 99.9% of the time have good intentions. It's that if we're doing things for them, we're not teaching them the skill, and we're not teaching them to self-reflect and identify their feelings. Mm-hmm. And we're not validating what they're actually feeling or experiencing. And so if we're doing it for them, we're not talking with them. We're engaging with them enough to actually find what it is that they need to validate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, one would think if I'm doing everything, I'm really validating, and in a way I'm stifling, but it kind of sounds like I'm doing it for my own needs, right? So whatever I went through, I'm thinking I'm just going to soften the blow for my kid. And I want to make it better, like to your point. But if their problems are a bit different than, say, ours or mine or yours when we were teenagers, you really have to have an open and reflective lens to say, oh, well, what's that like when, you're at home and you want to be social, but you don't know how to ask to be included?
Well, that's true. Yeah. And that is a real problem for even young kids. Mm-hmm. So giving them the skill, and schools are really catching on to this. They're doing a good job. They're teaching self-regulation skills and social skills earlier, which they really need to do. Mm-hmm. But I think, this could be argued too, that the problems aren't different because you can remember being a teen too. You wanted to feel included. You felt left out. And if not, you felt awkward. You were searching for your identity. We did that too. I think that maybe it just shows up a little differently in our society, the way it is with technology. I mean, you can't argue that technology. Yeah, you don't have a good argument if you say technology has had no influence today, because it absolutely has. Mm-hmm. So maybe the way the problems are showing up is different than it did for us, but we can understand as adults, and that we know how awkward it is to be a teen and how difficult it can be. Mm-hmm. So there are some commonalities there that we can at least relate to. So we can go back a little bit and understand that with our teens and say, look, I don't understand your world like you do, but can you please tell me, like, why are you feeling this way? Or what's happening right now to make you make that decision, and walk with them through it and not for them.
So I was just at the HRPAO conference in Toronto, and I'm going to tell you a fascinating story that I heard by one of the keynotes. He said that people like Bill Gates, there was a school in Seattle where all the high end individuals on the tech world, their kids went there. Okay. And most of them were not allowed to be on tech until they were 13 years old.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Yeah, based on the addictiveness that happens with, being online, because again, brain development and, structure. So I think what we're talking about here, and I don't know if you would agree, is just going back to some of the core basics of just being a parent, right? Like there's different stressors, there's different influences, but at the end of the day, you still have to parent, like pretending like it was, back in the 50s or the 40s, even though the influences have shifted. You have to get back to the basics where, like to your point, you have to teach your child about, consequences. You have to teach them about good and bad decisions. You have to, all those basic things. But I think we think that, oh, well, and people are busier, like stressed, like parents are more stressed, those types of things. So people aren't as home as much. So therefore, the latchkey kid now becomes the kid that probably is a latchkey plus, but now they have maybe people online that could offer them that support. So there's so many different things that are variables that are impacting things.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the technology piece, they have so much freedom with that.
Yes.
I struggle with that too. My middle child, he's a very gifted kid. He is, and kids are all gifted in each of their individual ways. They truly are. His is computer stuff. And he's only 9. So he doesn't play sports. I've tried many different activities for him. He will stay active in other ways, but he loves computers. And I struggle right now. I'm trying to decide, well, do I let him start coding more and let him dissect computer and maybe limit the screen time piece? Because I do know that there's a lot of research showing about changing brains, but then it's kind of, we're not sure how exactly. So I don't know. I don't know the answer. So we got to dive into research more and see. It's
right.
tough.
For sure. So resilience in today's age, is it different or does it look different?
It looks different. That's a good question. It looks different because if you talk to people who are older and they grew up, especially guys, and I have the perspective because I have 3 boys, so I look at it that way a little bit when I'm parenting, but they're tougher. They used to be tougher because they had to be. And it's not like it's okay to be a guy and be weak. It's not what we're saying. It's showing vulnerability, but we're not really that tough. Like we have taught our kids that there's support, but I don't think we've done it the right way. So I think the way we're showing support is maybe not the right way. So they had to be tough because they had to survive. But at the same time, we know how trauma can affect people too. And I think a lot of kids have experienced trauma and that is showing up in their behaviors too.
Yes.
So kids in the past, maybe they were tough and suck it up, but they were really struggling with something we should have addressed back then. So we are learning, but we're humans. So we're trying to adapt with what we have right now. It's a difficult question. It's a difficult answer.
And I think it's a work in progress as other than we know that our kids are that much more disconnected. Maybe, I'll play devil's advocate. We know more about it because we're so connected now, right?
Yeah.
But we weren't seeing the suicides and stuff like that, at least in my generation. We weren't seeing that many suicides. Like I know in our area here, Charlie, numerous Catherines. I was seeing a client and one person suicide, and I was seeing this client, another person in that same friend group also, right? So again, there's that mimicking that goes along with it also, which is so unfortunate. So we have to believe that there's so many elements, and we need to explore and understand and research more about what does resilience mean in this day and age, and what things we need to implement with the new stressors that are maybe our young adults are going through.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to identify those, and we have to listen to each other. We have to listen to our kids. Really have to listen to our kids. I mean, I can't tell you, it's really shifted how I see my children when I just kind of shut my mouth and listened to them and read them. But we still have to be parents, like you said, get back to the basics. There are some basics, and trust me, I have messed up many times. But getting to the boundaries, like just setting some boundaries, some clear boundaries with consistency, that is back to basics. Like, this is what I'm going to fight with you about every single time. This, let's see, if I'm going to be rigid or porous here, what's a healthy boundary? So
Right,
It's just
right.
the education, the psychoeducation is so important there too for parents. 'Cause we're all struggling.
So tell me, the podcast. What are you bringing to the podcast world now? I'm not that I'm an expert. I've been hacking around like the rest of podcasters out there, hoping that my message is being received in different arenas. Tell me, what was the kind of the impetus to start this? And it sounds fascinating. Even I love the title. Um, about what made you want to kind of create the podcast.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how I can reach people on a larger scale. And I told you earlier about how I feel like I'm not done in the classroom. Like the classroom is great. I just feel like I need to reach more people because I get to teach about social change. I get to teach skills. I get to teach people to think about the world with new perspectives and to challenge what they're going to do to make a difference. And if it needs to happen from just them or on a larger scale. So there's lots of topics I get to cover in my classes every day. So I'm constantly researching. And I started researching quite a bit about the teen brain 10 years ago, and they had new research out that was really capturing. And so that filtered into a lot of the lessons that I taught and prepared for. And so when I teach my classes, I think, well, what can we do to make this world a better place? It always comes back to that question. What can you do? What can I do? What can we do together? And so that's why connection, health, innovation, those are the three main underlying themes to how we can advance humanity. Because I don't want us just to survive and get by. There's too many of us who are suffering every day. And that's not a good way to go through life. I lost my sister friend 4.5 years ago to cancer, and I get to survive. And so I'm not just going to sit around. I'm going to thrive in this life that I have. And I'm not going to just show up for my kids. I want to show up for society and myself and my family. So that's my passion. I hope it goes well. I think it will. I think so many of us want to be a part of this conversation. So I want to be a part of the conversation, and I want to share it on a massive scale. That's my goal.
And it's so interesting, right? Because social change happens when big things go wrong, unfortunately, and that's, as a society, that's where the impetus for change comes. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Unfortunately, we have too much evidence in the mental health field around you and I to recognize that there's a lot of need. Unfortunately, say my always be like, it'd be nice that I could just close up shop as a psychotherapist and never have that role again. But really, because we use our brains so much now. Like, you think of your day and I think of my day. And when I'm mentally tired, it's because I haven't shut off my brain. You take the downtime at night, but sometimes that you have to really make a conscious effort to really work on shutting down your brain. Even, before it used to be easier. But now, because I'm also very connected because of my business and all those things, that sometimes I have to consciously get away from all stimuli, not do my audiobooks, which I think, oh, that's downtime. No, that's not down. Just go and really, really practice the things that I teach. Right?
That's hard to do, isn't it? Because you probably think of so many ways that you want to help people, and you don't want to stop. And that's right. What propels you forward.
Of course. I just before I was waiting for you, I just happened to cross a post, and there was a picture of Robin Williams, Kate Spade, and the chef. What's his name?
The one who's really boisterous.
Right. Yes. It's going to come back to me. But the one caption was, they were talking about each of their personalities, and they say they were always there for everybody else. They were always put together, and they always had a zest for life. And the quote at the bottom says, realize that sometimes the people that you perceive as the strongest are the ones that may be needing the biggest helping hand.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. You can imagine a high school. We have 800 people in our high school. Yeah. And you know how the popular kids shine, and there's some notable figures in our school.
Right.
And so I have literally had 3 or 4 boys come to me and cry over the last several years. I don't want to put a time frame on it because I don't want to single anyone out, but I'm telling you, it's been more than that, to be honest. And they come to me and they break down. And it's those kids who people think they have it all together. And so what I say to these guys is I say, do you think that so-and-so has it all together all the time? And they say, yeah, look at them. They're always happy. They're always, that people, they're so popular. They're involved in this and that. And I said, absolutely not. They don't. And because that frame, the frame of life or that frame of mind as a teenager is just so uniquely different. And that's why I want to capture the teenagers and their parents. It's really important that we capture teenage. It's a triangular approach.
Well, of course, you can't, I often say, I've had people say, okay, I'm not going to really slow down the car. I'm going to drop off the preteen or the teen, and you fix him and her, and then I'll pick them up in 60 minutes. And I go, okay. And then I see the child for a bit, and then I'm like, I always say the parents up front. So here's the deal. I cannot in isolation treat your child because you are a system. And a family is a system, like a school is a system. So I need, he or she may be, and we know these terms, the IP, what we call the identified patient, for anybody listening, not knowing what our terms are. But really at the end of the day, oftentimes, and you would know this, Charle, from doing the work that you do and being a teacher, the symptom generally that the child is demonstrating has to do with something, unless it's a real mental health concern. But even that, if parents are able to adapt accordingly to whatever is presenting with that child and adapt their situation, that child is able to land relatively well.
That's right. That's why if you don't know, you don't know. And
Right.
So if you have that education for the teachers, the parents, and the teen, now you've got everybody on board. And that's why I think there needs to be some psychoeducation around trauma-informed behaviors that might show up in your kid or in the classroom. And then within yourself, I mean, what better can we do to build resiliency than to provide these teens with tools of reflection and being able to identify things going on with themselves, and then the opportunity to ask for help and where to get that help. I mean, it's a big approach, but I know we can get there. We have to step into it, and that's what I'm hoping to do. That's what I'm doing. No more sitting around. I'm done sitting around.
Well, that podcast is going March 3rd. There's no getting off that now. You've said it out loud, and I'm sure you've said it to other people, but now I've got it on video and on audio.
Okay.
So I think the biggest thing that I find is when I have parents like that and they're not open, it's more difficult. So I have to really, really work. And sometimes the child is more motivated for change. The parents are longer to come along because the parents think I'm going to judge them.
Yeah.
Family therapist, I always say to my clients, look, I didn't come from an ideal upbringing. Did you? And then they look at me and they go, I said there was lots of positives, but there was a whole lot of negatives. So I don't know about you, but all I can tell you is from all the years that I've been doing this kind of work, in 25 years, most people have come in with imperfection. There's no ideal. There's no normal. And then they look at me and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then they start to open up about, my parents were good parents. Financially, they took care of them. So based on how they perceived it is, well, they didn't talk to me much, or they didn't teach me much, but they were good people. And I always say, I'm sure your parents were good people, and they did the best they could with what they had.
Right.
But now with information, right, we know that there's a different way to approach it. And then they go, oh, okay, right?
Right.
Because it's not personal. But I think sometimes people are really afraid that they're going to be blamed for what's happening with the child versus recognizing that could be tiny shifts, and that in making those shifts, the child feels a little bit less pressure, those types of things. And then you can see the change. I don't know if you find that when you're doing work with families or things like that.
I really do. Because again, it goes back to that validation. So not only the validation of what the teen is feeling and what they're coming into the family with, but it's also this perspective of the parent and making them feel human too. I love to humanize each party because that way each of them can maybe feel for the other person. It's really like, let's get down to the feelings here. Why are you resentful? Why are you feeling so angry? Brene Brown has awesome information and research on this. Great speaker, as we all know. She talks about resiliency and being vulnerable so that we can set those boundaries and actually not be so angry and resentful anymore. It's really powerful. So I love that part of it.
So tell us a little bit more specifically about who you'd like to attract for the podcast. Like, who is it? Who's your ideal audience? Like, who listening? Like, let's say people have some ideas for guests for you, or
Yeah.
things like that, and they could help you out. Who are you trying to get on? And
Yep.
what's the ultimate goal that you have for this podcast? Let's say we're spanning out 3 years from now.
Great. Yeah, I
What?
have a vision. I do have
Yeah.
a vision.
Okay. So
I-
tell me what it is.
Yeah, thank you. At first I thought I would attract more women, but then I realized, no, there's going to be a wide variety in the audience. Anybody who's an innovator, anyone who's in healthcare, anyone who's looking into mental health and changing the world and away from mental health, anyone who's evolutionary, anybody, and that could be scientifically based to see where we were as human beings, where we're going. That could be religious based. I mean, I've contacted Eben Alexander, and I don't know if you know what his book, Proof of Heaven, was amazing. And it was about, he's a neurosurgeon, and went into a coma, and, you know, his experience, because not everyone will agree, but it's very capturing, is that he died and he went to heaven and he came back and he wrote a story about it that really seems highly believable. At least to him, it's truth. And I say that because I know that there are people who discount it, but all I say is, you need to read the book. You need to listen to him. So I reached out to him, and I get to interview him, and I get to learn from that perspective. Right. And then I also, there's somebody in charge of infectious diseases who I'm interviewing in a couple of weeks, and we get to talk about the coronavirus, how that affects people, and is it going to be a real threat, and what kind of epidemics should we really be afraid of in the future of our lives. And then I also interviewed someone who's an amazing doctor. I mean, he graduated high school at 16 and college at like 19. Oh
my goodness.
Right. He was at Johns Hopkins. He's in the forefront of a new treatment for cancer treatment, immunotherapy, and I get to talk to him. I talked to Eva Olson. She's a Holocaust survivor, and tell me she doesn't have a great message about overcoming hatred in our society. So you can see there's a wide variety of topics I've already covered. So I'm looking for people who have merit. I want them to have merit, because I want people to understand where they're coming from. But I want them to be able to contribute to the conversation of, how can we make this world a better place? What are you working on right now? What kind of research have you done? What are your experiences that have helped put us in a better position to do better and thrive as human beings?
Sounds amazing. Sounds like you've really thought this through, and it's there's a lot of podcasts out there, but when you have that passion and vision for it, that's what happens, right? People, they hear that, they experience it, and I think truly, people want to make a difference. I think collectively, most of us, I often say, it's our duty to make the world a better place every generation that we go, right? And we have so much capacity now. I can sit in my rec room in Niagara Falls and speak to you, here somewhere in Niagara, and it could go all over the world and make a difference, right? And you never know whose life you're touching based on who you kind of have on your podcast.
It's so true. I just interviewed somebody today who's a domestic violence, I say victim, but really survivor.
Yeah.
And I said to her, our listeners are hearing you right now, and they're in a really devastating position right now. Reach through that microphone and speak to them. What can you do for them right now? Help them out. And that is my vision. I hope those people driving in their car are in that moment, and I can help them through it and tease that out so that I can say, look, you are not alone. There's a better life out there for you. That's what I'm hoping to do.
Well, I'm excited. I hope that you'd eventually have me on as a guest, and I'm going to tune in and make sure that I start listening so I can, add some value if or when I come on. Yeah. So tell people what else you do. So you're finishing up your graduate studies, and you're also a therapist with a local agency here in Niagara, and you also speak.
Yeah, so I was doing a lot of speaking engagements in the past, and then I had my third child, and I wanted to really throw myself back into teaching and not be split in too many directions. That wouldn't have been fair. But now I'm in a solid place, and that's why I went back to get my master's degree in social work so that I can have a new perspective and get my clinical skills. I wanted them to be in place because I would like to couple my education background and my clinical therapy skills. And that's how I want to approach my speaking. I have a lot of stories. I have a lot of information that's research-based and credible that I really want to share. And again, that triangulation approach, especially if I'm speaking to parents and frontline workers who work with teens and with teens. But I also spoken to groups on like managing life and stress on a business level. Again, getting the message out. I have lots of directions to go with it. So that is my vision as well.
Awesome. Well, it's been a delight interviewing you. So,
thank you.
Any last words of wisdom based on some of the things we're talking about, or just your vision of things with the podcast, or even something from the perspective of parents and raising children?
Yes, absolutely. One thing I've learned in my life through all of these things I've done is just have compassion for people. People are not like you. They have their own backgrounds. Try not to judge until you have the whole story. Then you can make a judgment. But just try to hear them, because you might be the only person hearing them at that moment that might change their life.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Charle. So what's my takeaway? My takeaway is that we all come from different upbringings, and you never know how people are going to perceive things. So in reference to teenagers, the helicopter parent, I guess I speak to you to say, it's great that you have the intention to make things better for your kids, but stop and ask, what do you need? And is what I'm doing helping you or hurting you? And if I could change something, what would you like me to change so I can get closer to you? So if you can, that's a powerful question, because you're putting the control back into your child's arms, and you'd be shocked. And then just be quiet and see what comes. And you never know what valuable information you're going to get. It may blow your mind, because it may be very, very simple. It need not be some huge epiphany, but it may be something quite simple that you could actually implement that would shift the dynamic. So again, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks so much, Charle, for giving us your time. And if you're needing any additional information on me, I'm Roxanne Durhodge. I'm a mental health and wellness specialist, and I do keynote speaking and training and coaching. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.